We must get our pictures taken? Okay. I worked in a factory years ago that had what we called the Wall of Shame. It featured pictures taken by a professional photographer of all office and floor personnel. As you would expect, the floor personnel were in dirty factory clothes, while the office staff wore dress attire. This tradition started when the plant opened, and new hires were sent to the photographer's studio for their picture at the end of their first year. I worked the third shift, and I was told that I and another coworker had to go after our shift to get it done. I tried to get out of it, but I was told clearly that we had to go. Now here comes the seemingly harmless act of malicious compliance. The coworker I went with was a drinking buddy. I told him at the bar the day before to bring a shirt and tie. He asked why, and I told him it would upset the plant manager. He was in. The next morning, we went to the studio, and the photographer gave us a puzzled look. He said he thought he had 2 floor workers scheduled, not office workers. For those who may not know, floor workers at most factories are often viewed as not very bright. I innocently said we didn't realize we couldn't look nice for our pictures. He skeptically took our pictures and sent us on our way. The fallout came about a month later when my coworker and I were called into the plant manager's office to explain our pictures. He was ready to explode when I explained that we just wanted to look nice since our pictures were being professionally taken. He turned a deep shade of red when I added that I didn't know it was against the rules for floor workers to dress up for their pictures. He dismissed us while trying not to lose his temper. My friend and I barely held our laughter in as he slammed the door behind us. It brought me great amusement to look at those pictures until the plant closed.
You cannot put a cashier's check on a credit card? Watch me. Back in the late 1990s, I was banking at Solomon Smith Barney, which offered a unique credit card. It was not a regular credit card or a debit card. It was a true credit card that wouldn't allow you to spend more than what you had in your checking account. This meant the money was set aside, but not deducted, until the due date. One day, I needed a cashier's check for $1,500 and went to a branch of my personal bank across town. I had to approach the customer service desk and requested a cashier's check, planning to pay with my Solomon Smith Barney credit card. The lady at the desk, who was not very friendly, snapped at me saying, "You can't put a cashier's check on a credit card." I understood her reasoning, but her attitude was unnecessary. Desperate to get the cashier's check, I argued a bit, but she was firm and almost seemed to enjoy my predicament. Then, she asked if there was anything else she could assist with. Here comes the moment of malicious compliance. I handed her my credit card and asked for a cash advance of $1,500. Back then, they used manual credit card imprint machines, so she had to go through the tedious process of imprinting my card, getting the paperwork approved, and handing out the cash. Once I had the $1,500 in $100 bills, she asked if there was anything else she could do for me. I replied, "Yes, I need a cashier's check for $1,500. She began to repeat her earlier refusal, but stopped mid-sentence when she realized I now had the cash. Dumbfounded, she had no choice but to process my cashier's check. I walked out with the check in hand, feeling very satisfied that I had outsmarted her and got what I needed, despite her initial refusal. It's a story I've cherished for decades. I appreciate all the responses to my story. Some people have questioned my understanding of the difference between a debit and a credit card. I do understand. I remember how cool this card was and how a credit card advances money, which you are responsible to pay back by a certain day each month. I know that you pay interest if you don't pay off your balance in full, and that you incur a late charge if you don't make your minimum payment on the due date. In contrast, with a debit card, the money is taken out of your account immediately. Let me tell you about this unique card. It never had interest or late charges because the credit card company withdrew the money from your checking account once a month on the due date. Although that money was still in the checking account earning interest, it was not available for withdrawal and did not count as part of the available balance. It functioned as an ATM card, but with a limit, which I don't remember exactly, but it was around $800. It also allowed a cash advance, and back then, there was no cash advance fee. Yes, I know it sounds hard to believe, but it's true. The staff at Solomon Smith Barney informed me about this trick. The cash advance limit was higher than the ATM limit, probably around $2,000. This credit card also offered reward points. I used the points to get a Bose Wave radio and 2 round-trip airline tickets to Lisbon, Portugal. I have never heard of a debit card that offered reward points, so yes, I know this card had unusual rules and rewards. But it was the 90s, and Solomon Smith Barney was a brokerage house, not a bank. This account had unique perks. I miss this account. If it were still available, I would have one. And this was not a debit card. It was a true credit card that offered everything a credit card does, including reward points. I have never heard of a debit card that provided reward points. Thank you to everyone who took the time to respond.
How one manager's layoff decision led to a $200,000 mistake and an unintended comeback. Backstory. This is another story about Sam and Murad. My manager Sam is extremely relaxed and an outstanding leader. His manager Murad is strict about following the rules. I work as an infrastructure and configuration manager and happen to be one of the more expensive resources on the project in my field. This story takes place in January 2023. The company was going through some restructuring, and most of our contracts included a last-in, first-out clause by default. When I joined in March 2022, I accepted a 10% pay cut to remove the last-in, first-out clause from my contract because I was seeking job stability. Although I was still earning more than I did in my previous job, it was only 20% more instead of 30%. Story. As the infrastructure manager, I am responsible for maintaining all the product licenses the project uses. One of these product licenses requires a digital signature to function. Typically, such tasks require the use of service accounts, which are owned by users. When someone leaves the organization, their service accounts are automatically transferred to their manager. Unfortunately, service accounts cannot have digital signatures, so I had to use mine in this case. The product activation process involves using the corresponding digital signature certificate. Since I already had a digital signature certificate for tax purposes, I decided to reuse it instead of obtaining a separate one. In India, digital signature certificates are encrypted and require a one-time password from my mobile number every time they are used. This mobile number must be associated with my national ID, as that's how most encryption services work in India. Sam was on vacation, his first in 5 years. Apart from taking a one-day leave in 2018 when he moved from India to Europe, he had never even taken a sick day. He recently got married, and for his honeymoon, he took a 2-month vacation to travel all over Europe with his new wife. In his absence, Murad was overseeing the project. Management asked Murad to cut 15% of his workforce. If you've read my previous posts, you would know that Murad was not pleased with me. So, the inevitable happened. I was called into a meeting with Murad and Human Resources. Murad asked me to voluntarily resign, or else I would be let go. This is a tactic companies in India often use, as being fired is considered a much bigger deal than simply losing a job. It's a cultural thing. Being fired carries a stigma that most people want to avoid. Human Resources usually tries to persuade people to resign voluntarily so that it doesn't become public knowledge that they were fired. This tactic often works well, as resigning saves the company from having to pay 3 months' salary, which they would owe if they were to lay off an employee. However, I knew better, so I refused his request. Murad was quite taken aback by this. Since I had called his bluff, he had to double down to show he meant business. By the end of the day, I received my termination email, with instructions on how to return company property. Here's the main point. I replied to the email, asking to schedule the return of the laptop promptly, as I needed to leave the city for a few days. My objective was to have them pick up my laptop from my place and format it as soon as possible. This will be important later. By the end of the week, my laptop was picked up. I had already backed up a copy of my digital signature certificate, so there were no issues on my end. Fast forward to mid-February and there was an issue with the product. A support ticket was raised, and the support team wanted to upgrade to the next version, as this was a known bug that had been resolved in the next version. The product was used once a week to create a weekly report, but no one really looked at it except for Sam, who was still on vacation. So its absence wasn't likely to be noticed for at least a full month. The end of the month report would bring it to upper management's attention. Now, support standard operating procedures require a license check. Hence it required decryption of the existing license. Long story short, I received a call asking for the digital signature certificate and one-time password, and I rejected. Murad eventually was informed, who asked the support team to provide a new license. The product support team informed him that they couldn't provide a new license without the company purchasing one. The license cost for this product was $200,000. At this point, Murad decided that they could live without the report. He mostly handled the team side of the project, so he wasn't really aware of the impact of this report. Sam returned from vacation at the end of February. By the first week of March, he noticed the missing weekly report and promptly called me. I informed him that Murad,
All right, human resources, he is your problem now. Here's the edited version of your story suitable for AI voiceover on YouTube. This story takes place during my time as a supervisor in a call center. It centers around an employee named Jamers, who did not like me and my compliance with human resources. Jamers was a new hire, probably about 21 at the time. He was a young man who seemed to have grown up privileged and entitled. But I didn't do the hiring, and everyone deserves a chance to start somewhere. I just wished this guy had been hired somewhere else. I prided myself on being fair, friendly, and understanding. However, Jamers always acted like a victim, claiming nothing was ever his fault. If a customer complained about his service, it was not his fault. If he provided incorrect information, he insisted he had been given the wrong details. If he called off, it was because something came up beyond his control. And so it went. Nothing was ever his fault. The situation with me escalated when I had to correct him on a call he took. The information he provided was so incorrect and potentially damaging to the client that I had to call the client back to offer the correct information and apologize for the misinformation. Company policy at the time mandated an automatic write-up for this. I brought Jamers into an office with the door open to inform him he was being written up and to explain why. Initially, he came up with every excuse in the book. Then he started asking why I was being hostile and mean, and why he thought I was yelling, though I was not, and the open door ensured there were witnesses. He refused to sign the write-up, but that was fine, it would go in his file regardless. After our meeting, he marched up to Human Resources. About half an hour later, Human Resources called me into their office. They asked why I yelled and cursed at Jamers. I was taken aback. I admitted it was my mistake not to have another supervisor with me during the write-up, but if I had yelled, everyone would have heard it. I denied the accusations, of course. Human Resources then informed me they were throwing out the write-up, stating it wasn't a significant issue. This effectively undermined my authority and sent a message that if I did my job, Human Resources would just reverse my actions. They also told me that from that point on, if Jamers had any issues or infractions, they would handle them. Now, here is where my compliance comes into play. They had no idea how many side conversations and other issues I had to deal with regarding Jamers. If he needed to call off, I told him to go talk to Human Resources. If there was a complaint, I told him to go to Human Resources and sent them an email about it. If he requested a day off, he went to Human Resources. It became a routine where Human Resources had to deal with him once or twice a day for months. For anything even slightly minor, I sent him to Human Resources. I knew it was driving them crazy as they didn't like being bothered. Eventually, Human Resources requested a meeting with me. They informed me that Jamers had called off and was going to be put on a final warning, and they wanted me to handle it. I reminded them they had asked to take charge of him. We reached a compromise, agreeing that we would both be involved. Jamers was brought into the office and told he was receiving a final warning for attendance. He protested, claiming it wasn't his fault, stating he had to go to the doctor. Human Resources asked for his doctor's note. He said he would bring it the next day. The following day, Jamers came into Human Resources and said, "This isn't working out, I quit." Human Resources got a glimpse of what I had dealt with, and just like that, the situation resolved itself. I love this sense of justice.
You don't want to pay the estimate? That's fine, ma'am. Enjoy your day. For context, the software development company where I interned uses a spreadsheet to estimate the cost of building software or updates for clients. This spreadsheet includes details about the employees working on the project, how long they estimate it will take, and other relevant information. After an intern gathers this information from various employees, we calculate the cost and send it to the client for approval. Since our company is quite popular in the area, we sometimes have a long queue. If a client rejects the estimate, they might have to wait in line again to request a new one. One slow day, I was mainly answering phones and running coffee errands, typical intern tasks. Then a client called in, requesting a piece of clock-in software for her employees to more accurately track their work hours. By this point in my internship, I had completed at least 4 or 5 of these spreadsheets and had been taught by my supervisor how to identify which departments would be needed for different projects. After gathering the details from the client, I hung up and translated her needs into technical terms for the employees. Half an hour later, I finished the spreadsheet and triple-checked the calculations. I emailed it to the client, and not even 2 minutes later I received an estimate rejected message on the company smartphone I had been given. She added a reply stating, "This estimate does not work for me." So I responded with, "We are sorry to hear that, ma'am. Please enjoy the rest of your day," and went back to my tasks. About an hour later, she emailed again asking, "Is that all you have to say?" At that point, I realized she was trying to negotiate the price and informed my supervisor that the client was attempting to haggle. My supervisor called the client and asked if she would like the estimate resent for her approval. The client outright stated that she wanted a lower price. My supervisor informed her that the price was non-negotiable and that she should accept it as is. The client then used her usual tactic, saying, "Let me speak with your manager," but my supervisor simply told her she would receive the same response and hung up. The client eventually called back and even visited the office to renegotiate the price but was turned down. However, she managed to secure a meeting with the manager to file a complaint about poor customer service and unprofessional behavior. My supervisor and I were called in to provide our side of the exchange. We presented the chat log and proof that she had initially rejected the estimate we sent. After seeing this evidence, she lost all color in her face and could not even look at my supervisor. Ultimately, she was placed on a blacklist for our company and was referred to other companies.
Thank you for listening. Remember to subscribe to Monumental Stories for new videos every day.